Hi, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and in this video I'm going to continue my analysis into Nietzsche's Will to Power. Specifically, the analysis is from notes 69 to notes 86 of Nietzsche's Will to Power. I'm using the Walter Kaufman translation, but any translation will basically do because you'll be able to follow along using the notes. Also, in today's lecture, I'm going to be incorporating a hybrid account between Nietzsche and Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. A lot of the latter part of this soon-to-be 2-hour assessment is going to be an account to try and fuse concepts within Nietzsche with Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. As we move through the series, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the analysis a bit deeper, quite a bit deeper. I want to put more emphasis into not just the analysis of Nietzsche's text, but the incorporation of his ideas into a broader theoretical understanding of oppression in general, of this will to power, of power in general, and so on. Let me just get started in a second. So, with that, feel free to go ahead and download the notes. Of course, the notes will expand as we progress through. We've passed the 10-hour threshold. This will soon be the longest video series that I have up. Currently, Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed is the longest, but by the end of this video, we should be approaching 12 hours. And this section is going to start with section 7 in the analysis. So, with that, let's begin. So this is Will to Power. It's section 7 in the notes, and it's notes 69 through 86. Okay. Again, Book 1, Part 2, the history of European nihilism. And specifically what Nietzsche is doing in this first section, in note 69, is he is looking through all the various disciplines of study, well, not all, but a number of the various disciplines of study within Western tradition of thought. He talks about natural sciences, he talks about politics, he'll talk about economics, history, art, and he locates nihilistic tendencies within each of these traditions. As we'll see much later in the analysis, and I don't think I actually incorporated it into the notes, Schopenhauer was a representation, as far as Nietzsche is concerned, of nihilism, pessimism within epistemology. Nietzsche himself is grounding this discourse of nihilism, pessimism, within a sense of morality. Right? Remember, if we're talking about values and the highest values being devalued, if we're talking about moral imperatives, if we're talking about positing or prescribing behavior, we're talking necessarily, I said this in like video 1, section 1, about a moral ethic, right? And it's the contamination, if you will. It is the discouragement that infuses itself within the moral ethic that becomes problematic for Nietzsche. So what he wants to do is situate within the history of European nihilism, nihilistic and pessimistic tendencies, and this is where the assessment begins. So nihilistic traits throughout Europe. Okay, the first is within the natural science. Nietzsche locates the nihilistic traits in various institutions, and we're going to take a look at these institutions. Natural science being the first. There is meaninglessness, right? And he locates this sense of nihilism within causalism, mechanism. Right? This is note 69. Nietzsche obviously supports the notion of human freedom, right? This idea of causalism, this idea of mechanism, without getting into it directly, is an infinite chain of cause and effects, right? Cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, and on and on and on, right? So that there's links in the chain. And then I find myself I find myself as nothing more than another link in the chain, right? I am the cause of the effect of my offspring, and they the cause of so on and so on and so on, right? So that I find myself within this link in the chain, right? This idea of mechanism, causalism, right? This infinite regression of stuff. Nietzsche says within the natural sciences, and obviously this isn't entirely new. This was also discussed by Hume, right? Hume, in his discourse, talks about sort of the problem of locating, and I'm not going to get into Hume's sort of discourse on causation, but philosophers have always been sort of obsessed with the notion of causation. That still hasn't changed. What Nietzsche is saying is, within the natural sciences, there is this nihilistic tendency, this defeatist tendency to say that we are nothing more than just links in this causal, mechanistic chain of events, right? It's nothing more, and this is sort of my spiel, and this is part of my spiel and part of the problem that I have with contemporary natural sciences. As I stated in the video, what I believe. Not that I'm anti-science. I think science is probably the greatest governing paradigm for understanding our existence. But the point is, you can't just have this reductivist bend, right? Because then it becomes sort of meaninglessness, right? There is no need, there is no meaning outside of the physical embodiment of stuff, right? So that becomes problematic. And as Nietzsche says, this becomes meaninglessness, right? This becomes meaningless to talk about my significance or the significance of my offspring or whatever, if all that is to be understood in terms of this causal, necessary, deterministic, inflexible chain of and sequence of events, right? If that's all that there is, then this becomes problematic. So number 2 is politics, right? Politics and lack of faith in one's right, right? There's a lack of faith in one's right. And I'll put that down. And actually, I want to read that. I want to read that one. It's number 69. Number 69. 69. Nihilistic trait. Politics. One lacks the faith in one's right. Innocence. All right, so it's a lack of faith in one's right. And the question is, and this is very, very important, right? The question is, how do we make sense of one's right within politics? We'll see this much, much later. And how does that compare to what he's previously said, right? What he's previously said is, so we'll write that down, lack of faith in one's right. I'm not sure if it's plural. Lack of faith in one's right, right? So this lack of faith in one's right, this pessimistic bend that European nihilism has embraced within its political paradigm results in, according to Nietzsche, a lack of faith in the individual's right. Now, I'm not going to get into it now, but basically anytime we're talking about a right, right? So if we're talking about the individual, and we say that the individual has a right, right? The individual has this thing, that thing has a right, then there is either an institutional, or for other individuals, there is a duty to respect that right. So anytime we have rights, there are duties to respect those rights, right? This is sort of classical sort of intro to poli-sci theory, right? Anytime we're talking about rights, and we say that an individual has a right to X, then some other individual, some group of individuals, or the institution as such, has a duty to respect those rights. So anytime we're talking about rights, we're always talking about duties. If there's a lack of faith in one's right, if I'm losing faith in my own rights, and I'm not sure, and as we'll see in a little bit, sort of how I, in a Foucauldian sense, how I navigate this genealogy of power, how I navigate this structure, this paradigm of power. Remember, this is about a will to power. How do I make sense of my relationship to power? Then there can't be a sense in which, if this is unclear,